All right, so let's get an update on the power outages caused by the wind damage. Consumers Energy outage map on your screen right now showing around 47, almost 48,000 customers across the state impacted, of course, without electricity. Some of the hardest hit areas include Ottawa County. And then as we travel south toward the I-94 corridor from about Kalamazoo to Jackson, we see a lot of outages popping up there, really in the Battle Creek area. We're actually being told by Consumers Energy staff that Battle Creek, Calhoun County specifically, was very hit rather hard during those winds that we saw yesterday. And right now we know hundreds of Consumers crews were staged ahead of yesterday's storms. We know those crews now working to restore power to those customers, and it is the latest restoration effort by Consumers in a long string of harsh weather this spring. Joining us this morning live is Chris Foltz. He's the Vice President for Electric Distribution from Consumers. Chris, good morning to you. Where do restoration efforts stand at this hour?
Morning. Well, you are absolutely correct. It has been an extraordinary first part of the year with the weather, but we've been ready and we're ready for this one. Right now, we have about, let me back up. We had about 83,000 customers who lost their power when those high winds came through last night. We've restored about 35,000 so far.
Wow. I mean, that's a huge improvement. Yeah, we're down to about 48,000 customers statewide. A lot of the bulk of that being in West Michigan, especially along I-94 there. I'm curious on how wind impacts the Consumers Energy system. I know that we get storms in that can sometimes knock power out. You know, we saw over the winter a lot of ice and snow had impacts on the consumer system. This one was mostly the wind that we saw. So how does the wind typically impact the consumer system?
Yeah, great question. So this system came through as one big front. Picture kind of like one wave coming through. It happened, high winds, and then it left the outages behind it, and that's when we got to work. So those high winds, and some of them were up to the mid-60s, 64, 65 miles per hour, they'll take down large trees, they'll take down branches, and in some cases, they'll bring down the poles themselves. So we have crews up there who are clearing the downed trees, and they're putting the poles and wires back up as fast and as safely as they can.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a huge effort. Again, hundreds of Consumers crews were staged ahead of this, Sam.
Absolutely. And now there's no ongoing storms at this hour, but it is still decently breezy across West Michigan. Is there a threshold that your crews have to wait to be able to be up on their machinery and fixing these power lines in terms of wind speeds?
There is. So the general rule is if the winds are blowing greater than 35 miles per hour, it is unsafe to put them up in a bucket or have them climb a pole. Luckily, in this case, those winds, like I said, were kind of one big wave, one big short burst that came through the state. So we were able to get to restoration pretty quickly after those winds died down in the middle of the evening last night.
Yeah, I want to ask specifically about Calhoun County because we know that was where a bulk of the outages stand at this point. Tell us about what happened there and what your crews are working to do on the ground in Calhoun County.
Yep. So in that area, we had some of the more concentrated winds brought down a lot of trees, and some of our equipment came down when those trees came down. We have, I would say, the majority of our crews in that between Kalamazoo and Battle Creek in that general area. We have over 500 crews that are on the system working. They'll continue to work throughout the day until the last customer is on. We also, I want to note, we have 2 mobile command centers, one near Kalamazoo, one near Battle Creek, and we use that as a central, it's kind of like a mobile office on wheels, and we can run a large number of crews and a lot of equipment out of that area. So eyes and boots on the ground, crews in the field, heavily focused in the area that you mentioned.
Let's talk about safety tips for those that may be without power now, or maybe those who are driving or maybe walking by down power lines. What are some of the things that Consumers recommends to those folks? Obviously, I think the big one is to stay clear of the down power lines, but what is Consumers recommending right now?
So you nailed it. If you see a down wire, please just assume it's energized. Don't try and guess if it's hot or if it's not. Just assume it's energized and assume it's unsafe. Stay at least 25 feet away, and please make sure that you call either 911 and they will call us to dispatch somebody to make it safe, or you can call us directly at 800-477-5050. I'll also mention, if you are using a generator, make sure that's outdoors in a really well ventilated area.
Absolutely. And it has been a brutal couple of months, to say the least, between ice storms, dam safety, severe weather. How are you guys staying on top of all of this?
Well, we have an in-house meteorologist. We have a team who plans and prepares for any emergency, and know that we plan for the worst case. We planned for the worst case last night. We were ready for it. But Michigan has really seen the worst weather is getting worse, and it's getting more frequently. We've had in the state of Michigan 13 tornadoes already this year. That's the average for Michigan per year is 13. So we've seen ice, we've seen tornadoes, we've seen the wind, we've seen it all, but we've been ready, and our customers are resilient. We appreciate their patience, and we're not going anywhere. We'll be here all day until the last customer's on.
Yeah, you mentioned your in-house meteorologist, the tools at your disposal. How do you guys go about planning where you're going to set up crews across the state? Of course, you mentioned you have mobile command centers right now in Kazoo and over in Battle Creek. How do you go about determining the locations that you're going to say, all right, we're going to have these people stationed here when things start to pop up in the consumer's energy system?
Yeah, so we look at our meteorologist looks at a number of models, and whereas a lot of your viewers might be kind of wanting to know what the most likely scenario is, we plan for the worst case, and so we can predict based on all these models what's going to be the worst case scenario, where is the storm going to materialize or come across the lake, so we know where it's going to start, how it's going to develop, and then where it's going to exit. And so we'll look at we can predict the hardest hit areas where those will be. And we'll put equipment there, not just crews, we'll put poles and cross arms and all the materials that we'll need to repair the system in a storm. Those are all staged ahead of time, just like the crews ready for the storm.
Fantastic. Yeah, Haley Vaughn, a former West Michigan meteorologist. You've got a good one there at Consumers, one of the best in the business.
Consumers Energy meteorologist, and Haley's doing a great job.
Well, hey, I want to ask you too. I remember when I first started my job here at WZZM, Consumers Energy, I believe at the time, was undergoing kind of a massive overhaul of the system where you guys were starting to put your electricity lines underground to kind of help with wind issues, help mitigate some of those things when we do see high winds like we did yesterday. Is that still happening, and what's the status of that? And if you can, explain why that is important to the consumer system.
So we have lots of tools in our toolbox to make the system more resilient. We're trimming more trees than ever. We can use taller, stronger poles, and that's what we're doing across the state. We can also do things like put the lines underground, and that's important. It doesn't make sense in every case, but in some cases, it's a great candidate to say there's too many tree outages here. The lines are really hard to get to. We can put it underground, and that really takes the trees falling out of the equation. It also makes, it's much easier to maintain, and so the outages are much less frequent and much more reliable in those areas. Again, not every line is a candidate for going underground, but it's absolutely a tool in our toolbox for making the system more resilient.
Yeah, absolutely. Final question for you, I guess, what is your message to customers this morning as, you got 48,000 folks without power right now. What is your message to them right now as you guys continue to clean up here?
Well, the weather's just been relentless, and we appreciate their patience. Know that we have a small army of crews in the area, and we'll be working around the clock until the last customer is on. We do expect to have our customers back online by midnight tonight. A couple in the hardest hit areas may go into the early morning hours, but we're not going anywhere. We're here, and we appreciate our customers' resilience and patience.
All right, Chris Fultz, the Vice President for Electric Distribution for Consumers Energy. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Have a great day. Thank you.